Hello everybody, I'm Maggie Charles and today I'd like to talk to you about the long-term take-up by students of corpus-based learning. So I'd like to start with a little bit of background. Research has shown that data-driven learning, which is a form of corpus-based learning, is effective, and indeed more instructors are using corpora in their teaching. In fact, Chen Flowerdew have claimed that data-driven learning, so corpus-based learning, is becoming more mainstream in EAP. Now, I was a bit curious about this claim and I wanted to see whether the increase in use was reflected over time in my own course. And this is my own course that I worked on until 2017. In fact, I think it's still going now. And it started in 2009. So the course is called Writing in Your Field with Corpora, and the participants are L2 graduates for the most part. A few course details. This is our setup in a computer laboratory. There were 4 to 7 parallel classes taught by 1 to 4 teachers, and it ran once per year as part of the academic writing course. There was 1 2-hour session per week for 6 weeks. There were about 10 to 16 students in class, and it was an open access, non-assessed course. The software we used was AntConc and the Ant file converter. So next, a word about the students. As you can see, in terms of degree, the majority were doctoral students, with about half as many, or a bit more than that, master's students, and then a few of other status. In terms of disciplines, there were more natural science graduates than social science graduates, and more social science than humanities. When we think about gender, we can see we have roughly equal numbers of male and female participants. And in terms of L1, Chinese was the most frequent language spoken, followed by Spanish, German, and then Italian and Japanese at 6%, with a very wide range indeed of other languages spoken. The corpora consisted of do-it-yourself corpora, and these were corpora that the students built using research articles in their own field or topic area. At the point at which they took the course, they had already downloaded many articles into their bibliographies, and these formed the basis of their corpora. They used then the Ant file converter, which is a free batch converter, to convert the texts from PDF form to plain text, which is what you have to use with Corpus software. And the students, the vast majority of them, did nothing else at all. So that was, in effect, their corpus. In terms of size, you can see that these corpora are actually very small, with 56% of them being under 200,000 words. But I should say that these are extremely narrowly focused corpora. So just to give you an example, one student in geography and environment was writing about the effect of travel and transport on well-being and health. He had a very small corpus, I think it was about 130,000 words, 14 research articles, but he rated that corpus as extremely useful. So it's important to realise these are not disciplinary corpora. These are much more narrowly focused than that. They're actually topic-specific corpora. The data I was using came from 3 questionnaires. First of all, we administered a pre-course questionnaire to find out the baseline of where students were when they came into the course, and the students were in term 3 of their first year of graduate studies. In the final class of the course, we administered an immediate post-course questionnaire to all available participants. And then a year later, we sent out a link to an online questionnaire 1 year after the end of the course. So the students had no more teaching after the end of the immediate course, after they filled in the immediate course questionnaire. So what we have here then is a picture of a single course and its development at a single university over 9 years. Here are the questionnaire totals. You can see there is indeed a considerable drop-off, but nevertheless, I would argue that we still have considerable numbers of responses. Pardon me. My research questions, I wanted to look at this period of 2009 to 2017, and I wanted to know what the level of pre-course corpus use was for English language learning purposes. I wanted to know what the level of immediate post-course was, and the question asked about corpus use outside class. So this is autonomous use or independent use in the student's own time. And I also wanted to know what the level of delayed post-course corpus use was, so 1 year later. And I was interested to see whether these measures changed over the period 2009 to 2017, because if Chen and Flowerdew are right, then we should see all of these measures increasing over that period. So let's have a look first of all then at our pre-course data. What we can see first of all is really quite a low use, but what we can also see is that the usage is stable. Okay, now in each of these sets of results, I'm giving you 2 results. The top line is the result for all use, and the bottom line is the results for frequent use. And by frequent use, I defined as once per week or more. And what we can see is, of course, that frequent use is much lower than all use. Okay. So what can we say? Well, pre-course use, first of all, both of these measures are stable. All pre-course use was had a mean of 24%. Frequent post-course use was a mean of around 11%. And what is also noticeable is that there is this gap between all use and frequent use. And we're going to see that, in fact, on all of our measures. So what we can conclude then so far is that there is an ongoing low take-up of corpus use in students' practice. And this is quite interesting because these students come from all over the world, as you saw from their L1s, and it would seem that although a certain number of them have been introduced to corpora, really very few of them have incorporated corpus use into their everyday practice. When we look at immediate post-course use, we can see that we have very high use. So we can see that the level of all is up in the 80s, while the level of frequent use is rising up into the 60s. And what we also notice is that both measures are actually increasing. So this data tends to support the claim of Flowerdew that there is an increasing use of corpora by students. However, of course, the trend line that we see for all use is only a very slight rise, and it is primarily the trend line that we see on frequent use that shows a considerable increase. Okay, means for all use around 87% and for frequent use 61%. So these show really a very pronounced increase over pre-course use. The gap, however, between all use and frequent use is around 26%. So that gap is still in existence. What we can conclude then is that the course has been successful in that there is much higher use of corpora compared to pre-course, and that this does indeed show that corpus use has increased over time. Turning now to the delayed post-course use, we can see that the figures have reduced somewhat from the immediate post-course use, and again we can see that the trend lines are stable. Okay, so the increases that we saw at immediate post-course use have not been maintained. So as we saw, there's been a reduction. All use has a mean of around 62%, frequent use around 37%, with this gap still in evidence between all use and frequent use. Nonetheless, we can see that the use is still high. So if we have 37% of frequent users, then that is still a considerable amount of use, although there has been a decrease in use when it's compared to the immediate post-course use. And I'll return to why this may be so in a moment. The last set of findings I'd like to show you are those for frequent use, because when we are looking at frequent users, we are actually looking at the students who have really incorporated corpus use into their toolkit. They're using it every week regularly. Now, the very bottom line here is pre-course. The top line here, so the turquoise line, is the immediate post-course, and in between the middle, the red line, is the delayed post-course. So what can we say then? Well, compared to the pre-course mean of 11%, the immediate post-course mean show a large increase, and the delayed post-course mean shows a considerable increase. Why might this be so? Well, I think the corpus is more useful. So these do-it-yourself corpora are discipline and topic specific. So I think that they respond to the students' needs much more clearly than available corpora. Moreover, the students know, they understand the contents of the corpus, so there should be no problem with understanding the vocabulary. These are papers that they've read or should have read. And finally, the students are in control of the corpus, so they can put files in, they can take files out. When we compare the delayed post-course to the immediate post-course, and we saw that considerable decrease, why might this be? Well, at delayed post-course, many students are not actually writing, so many are involved in fieldwork or experiments. And we can contrast that with the immediate course, when most students in term 3 of their first year are either writing a dissertation if they're a master's student, or they're writing an upgrade paper if they're a doctoral student. In addition to that, of course, the novelty effect has worn off. So it's no longer an interesting tool and let's see what it shows. It's just a tool. And finally, of course, there's no expert input available. So the students are now very much on their own. So what can we say in conclusion? Well, long-term take-up, then, when we're looking over this period of 9 years, from 2009 to 2017, the corpus course has successfully increased the number of frequent users, both at immediate post-course and at delayed post-course. When we look over the course of time and ask ourselves about whether there has been an increase, then I think the evidence is much less clear. When we look at the delayed post-course use, remember that was stable, so there hasn't been an increase over that 9 years in corpus use. However, when we look at the immediate post-course use, we can see an increase, and that's a finding that would go to support the claim by Chen and Flowerdew that more students are, that corpora are becoming more mainstream in EAP. The other, I think, interesting and perhaps concerning finding is this gap between all users and frequent users, because that remains at all stages, and we have to ask why, when students have tried a corpus first, they don't then make it part of their normal everyday writing practice. So what more can be done? Well, if we look at research, then I think we need more longitudinal data. We simply don't know what happens in other courses. I think we also need more qualitative data. So I've shown you some numbers, but it would be really interesting to find the qualitative comments behind those numbers that help explain them. Finally, I think researchers do tend to talk to researchers and only researchers. And researchers really, I think, need to make their accounts more teacher-friendly. When we think about EAP instruction, then I think we can advise that it's a good idea to have ongoing support groups, perhaps informally constituted, more just-in-time provision, so the provision perhaps of short catch-up courses for doctoral students on their return from fieldwork, and finally online tools. Now here I think there have been some very interesting innovations recently, and one could mention the Bohr Corpus Quick Links, which is a tool for helping students correct their writing. We can also mention Collocate, which is a tool to help students with collocations. And the other one I'd like to briefly reference is Crosthwaite's short introductory course on corpus use for students, and that's an online course. I'm going to stop there then. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm going to leave you with some references.